Back, Thom Hartmann here with you. A couple of news stories here I wanted to go through and share with you, and then we'll get back to Anything Goes Friday and your calls. Jeff Sessions last night gave a speech about how he is tripling the number of investigations into leaks. Principally, obviously the White House is freaked out about this. Yesterday was the day that the transcripts of Donald Trump's discussions with Mexican President Peña Nieto and Australian President Malcolm Turnbull were both leaked. And, where did those come from? Who got them? You'll recall President Obama prosecuted more leakers than than all other presidents in the history of the United States combined. And clearly, Trump wants to do even more than that. I don't think this is a good thing, and I think that we need a Whistleblower Protection Act that protects both leakers and reporters who accept and publish those leaks when those leaks can be demonstrated to be in the public interest. And, it concerns me tremendously that this is happening. This looks to me like the beginning of the death of the media. The media will simply become lapdogs. I mean, not to say that they're not already to a large extent. You watch the Sunday shows, Republican senators come on, they lie through their teeth and nobody challenges them. I mean, they're just now starting to challenge Trump on all his lies. But when Jeff Sessions says this, he says, one of the things we are doing is reviewing the policies affecting media subpoenas. Now, when you're subpoenaed, if they impanel a grand jury and you're subpoenaed, basically, you've got no choice. You're going to testify. If they grant you immunity, you are going to testify or you are going to jail. And this is scary stuff. I am concerned about it. As a member of the media and as a consumer of the media, and we're all consumers of the media, we should all be, frankly, frightened by this kind of behavior coming out of the White House. I was opposed to doing it. I was opposed to it when the Obama administration was doing it. I'm opposed to it when the Trump administration is doing it. This is not a partisan issue. This is a government transparency issue. And government transparency is something that this country was built on. It's the core. It's a core animating principle for the United States. I mentioned earlier Black Agenda Report. The Black Agenda Report, Bruce Dixon is the editor, and he wrote an op-ed or an article you can find over there at Black Agenda Report titled, "It's Getting Real, Google Censors the Left and Us." And he writes, conclusive evidence exists that Google is suppressing public access to socialist and left-wing websites, almost certainly including the Black Agenda Report. In fact, Black Agenda Report is by all accounts the only Black-owned, run, and oriented left website so targeted. And then he goes through all the other ones that are not. He says it's just a matter of time. Convincing evidence has emerged that Google is actively suppressing public access. Now, here's how it happened. In the wake of Hillary Clinton losing the election, and actually it was even before that. This was in September. In the wake of all the so-called fake news stories that were rolling out toward the end of last year, a group called the First Draft Coalition, which was Google, Facebook, Twitter, New York Times, Washington Post, BuzzFeed News, Agence France Presse, and CNN, got together and they said, let's put together a list of websites that we will never source from. We're not, these websites are known to carry fake news. And, in principle, it sounds like a good idea. You put InfoWars on there, Alex Jones's site, or Breitbart. I mean, there's, or the clearly fake news ones, the ones out of the old Eastern European states and stuff like that. Where what was that kid in Moldova or whatever, wherever he was, who was making $10,000 a month running fake news stories that that he was selling advertising on. Say that again. No, it wasn't Serbia. It was one of the M countries. But in any case. So you can understand the logic behind it, but what happened was they came up with a list of crazy far-right sites, and then it was like, okay, we've got to have balance. This is this phony balance thing, right? It's like if you're going to have somebody saying there's global warming, you got to have a climate science denier on, even though 100% of climate scientists who don't work for fossil fuel companies agree climate change is real and it's being caused by people. It's not even 97% anymore. It's 100%. of peer-reviewed, published climate scientists who do not work for fossil fuel industries. The what? Macedonia. Thank you, Chris. Chris looks it up while I'm talking. Brilliant. But so they came up with a bunch of right-wing sites that they're not going to list because they're actively engaging in fake news, and some just BS sites, some nonsense sites that they're going to block. But then it was like, well, we got to block a bunch of left-wing sites too, right? So this is what they blocked and how much their traffic dropped, according to this article by Ben Dixon or Bruce Dixon, excuse me, in Black Agenda Report. The World Socialist website fell by 67%. Alternet.org fell by 63%. I publish an Alternet, pretty much every week. It's a brilliant site, one of my favorites. Globalresearch.ca, that's a Canadian site, fell by 62%. Consortium News fell by 47%. Socialist Worker by 47%. Media Matters. Media Matters for America. David Brock's site. I mean, you don't get more kind of mainstream Democratic Party than Media Matters. Most of what they do is point out the lies on Fox. They were listed as a fake news source. Their traffic fell by 42% on Google. This is all, Google simply no longer indexing these sites, or at least many of the articles on these sites. Common Dreams fell by 37%. International Viewpoint, 36%. Democracy Now! Fell 36%. Democracy Now! Amy Goodman's site, probably the best news site in the United States, fell by 36%. WikiLeaks fell by 30%. Truth Out, another site that I write for that has great content. They've got 2 of my books on there you can read for free. Rebooting the American Dream and Unequal Protection. Truth Out fell by 25%. Counterpunch fell by 21%. And The Intercept fell by 19%. These are not fake news sites. There's something really wrong here. And finally, the last thing I wanted to bring up, just to toss on the table, and then we can talk about it for the rest of the hour. 2 stories back to back. Number 1, the Washington Post. Emily Rohala on August 2nd wrote an article titled, Apple, Amazon Help China Curb the Use of Anti-Censorship Tools. Now, that sounds like a good thing until you realize that it is curb, anti, it's a double negative, right? You could rewrite that headline as Amazon and Apple help China censor the internet. And what they're doing is they're pulling VPNs. VPNs are virtual private networks. With a VPN on, your computer talks to another computer someplace else, typically in another country, over an encrypted line, so that so your ISP can't listen in, and so the Chinese government can't listen in. So if you've got a VPN on your iPhone or on your computer, and you're in China, and the other end of that is in Los Angeles, then all China sees is gibberish. They have no idea what websites you're visiting. And you're actually connected to an internet portal in Los Angeles, not in China, even though you're in China. This is how VPN works. And there's all kinds of VPN products in the Apple Store, and Amazon sells VPN products. Not anymore in China, though. They are bowing down and kissing the butts of the Chinese dictators. Meanwhile, Benjamin Haas in Hong Kong, now this was back on the 10th of July. This story's been sitting on my desk now for 3 weeks. I'm waiting to dig through the pile here. We finally got down to it. A Chinese activist who was arrested after investigating working conditions at a factory making Ivanka Trump branded shoes says he believes the connection to the U.S. president's daughter led to his detention. This is amazing. The guy's name is Hua Haifeng, and he told The Guardian, first of all, he's a labor activist. He goes around and inspects factories, and he's exposed a lot of dirty dealing and bad employment, employer practices, maltreatment, mistreatment of employees in China, in factories across China. And when he went to this particular factory, he had no idea that they were making Ivanka Trump's stuff. So he thought it was just another, hey, I'm going to expose another factory, and something that he does, and the Chinese tolerate that. They've let him get away with it because, they're getting a lot of flack from their employees, from workers in China. They're trying to raise standards of living. This is the direction ultimately that they have to go anyway, and they know it. The government knows it. But this was Ivanka Trump's stuff, and they want things from Donald. They, in particular, don't want him putting tariffs on Chinese-made goods. So he shows up at this factory, and he gets dragged off. He gets arrested. He says, when I was first taken away by the police, I couldn't understand why I was being arrested. But once I was released and reconnected with the outside world, I think it was probably because of the factory's connection to Ivanka. He didn't know about Ivanka's connection to this factory until after he got out of being arrested and looked it up on the internet. He said, before I arrived at the factory, I didn't even know Ivanka had a clothing brand, and it wasn't until I was released I knew this brand was related to the daughter of the U.S. president. Benjamin Haas in Hong Kong writes for The Guardian. He adds, the allegations echo similar charges of low wages and anti-union intimidation The Guardian found at a factory making Ivanka Trump products in Indonesia. So the Chinese cracking down. Hua said his 7-year-old daughter cried when she saw him for the first time since he came out of detention. My family missed me. He said this was very scary for them. This guy getting arrested because how dare he look into the conditions, the workers' conditions at the factory making Ivanka Trump stuff. So the question, if we're supporting Apple and Amazon in supporting China oppressing their people, what has happened to American values? What has happened to American companies promoting American values? American companies helping promote American values around the world. Have we just said to hell with all that? It's all about the money? Apparently we have, and I think that's wrong.